So my name is, my birth name is Dorina Melanie Smith. Most people call me D. It's just easier that way. And I started running a couple of years ago, on and off.
Okay.
And about 2 or 3 years ago, I went ahead and I belong to a sorority, so we do a lot of fundraisers, charity events, and we do a lot of community service. So one year was in the summertime. My chapter signed up for the Percy Sutton race. We were there to volunteer. So I did some volunteer work there. I was in the usually after the runners are finished, we were there to hand out, snacks and so forth and refreshments. So I had such a positive experience watching all the runners, and I said to myself, one day I'm going to be on the other side and I'm going to be the one running, and somebody else is going to be handing me snacks. So I had such a positive experience from that.
So how was it?
It was great. I started off cold. When I got here, it was about 60 degrees, so I was a little freezing. As soon as we got up that hill, that's when it was on.
Oh yeah?
It was on and popping.
So what was your time? Your time was good?
My time was about 48 minutes. I started slowing down a little bit, especially when we went up the hill. But out of all the races I've done, this is by far the one that I look forward to. It's not only the fact that it's in Harlem, I don't have to say anything about it, you can figure that out. But it's the community, it's the energy, and the spirit of the people. This race I do every year. This is the one race I look forward to.
Okay.
I'm done for the day. And tomorrow I have 20 miles to do.
So from there I decided to join a running group. I noticed at the Percy Sutton race that there was a large group called Black Girls Run. They had pink and black shirts on. And I saw Black Men's Run. So I said, that's kind of interesting. Let me do some research and find out who this group is. And sure enough, I found out that Black Girls Run was a national group, and they had different groups within the city. I just had to locate my city and find an ambassador in my neighborhood, which I did. And I was able to connect with a group in the Bronx, and then it just took off from there. Our group met on Tuesday morning around 4:30, 5 o'clock. We did a couple of miles here and there. We were able to support each other, stay healthy, run, give recipes, and sign up for other fun races. Most of the women in my group had already did marathons. I was probably the only one that hadn't done one. At least I ran at that time was about, let's say, more than 7 to 8 miles. So I was encouraged to sign up for different races. So I started off small, and I started signing up for different races here and there. And the next thing I know, a year later, I was actually preparing for a marathon. Because what happens is you start running over a certain period of time. So it starts to accumulate. So you'll start off with 5 miles, and then you'll start increasing it to maybe 7 miles and 9 miles and 10 miles. And you're doing this collectively with the group. You're not necessarily running by yourself. But over a period of time, you do build up endurance from there. Also, the importance of being in a group is it holds you more accountable. So we would meet with the group Tuesdays, and sometimes during the week we would just call each other and say, hey, do you want to go out and run? Let's go to Van Cortlandt, let's go to the Greenway. And then we would meet on Saturdays as well. So it just really started from there. I've always been very active, whether it was running, lifting weights, jump rope. I've always been active since I was a child. I was very athletic. What happened was I think a couple of years ago, we all knew about the New York City Marathon. We're New Yorkers, so that's a big event in November, whether you run or not. So one day I said to myself, you know what, that's going to be on my bucket list. I'm actually going to do a marathon. I didn't know when, and I didn't know how. And it was a joke at one point, because I was like, yeah, one day, I'm just going to do a marathon. Knew nothing about a marathon at all. So I thought you had to have all this experience and et cetera, et cetera. And then that was far from the truth. It was just a matter of you start small and then you build from there.
Maria Dorina and Dorina Smith and Randy Bender. Come on, Randy!
Okay, so basically, training starts in the summertime. That's when you officially start training. I would say the first week of July. That's like the basic time that most people start. Prior to July, you're running, but what you're doing is you're building your base. You're building endurance. You're not running long distance. So basically, prior to my training, I was running maybe 3 times a week with my group. Couple of miles here, couple of miles there. So what you're doing is you're building your base and you're gauging yourself and you're preparing to start training in July. Once you start training in July, you get a training program that works for you. Remember, most of us work full-time jobs. We're not professional runners. So you find a program. Programs usually about 18 weeks, but there's different programs. You can go on YouTube, you go on internet and just type in marathon training, and then you'll see a bunch of different training programs. So it's about, I would say about 18 weeks. 18 weeks sounds about reasonable because it takes into account, you know, you're running 4 times a week. So you do 3 short ones and you do 1 long run. And generally what we do is, because there's so many of us training for a marathon, we all get together and we coordinate our schedule so we can run, we could do this together, especially with the long runs. The long runs are like 12, 13, 14, 15 miles. You really don't want to be out there by yourself. You can if you want to. That's absolutely fine. But it's nice to run, and when you're doing a long run, it's nice to be with a group. The short runs we do during the week. Most of us do it before we go to work, if we can fit it in. Some of us will take days off during the week. If you have days off at work you could take, we're doing it on a day off. Some of us are doing it Saturdays and Sundays, so it's very collective. We always stay in contact with the group and check in to see how everyone is doing. Because as I said to you before, we work full-time jobs. We have families and we have other responsibilities. So you have to take all that and incorporate that into a program. So that it's definitely a balancing act. At least in my case, I found it to be a balancing act.
Sure.
There. And then you got to throw in good, you know, a nice good nutrition, and you want to throw in some cross training on top of that. So.
Need to know what to eat while training for a marathon? Well, I'm registered dietitian Sarah Jane Bedwell, and I've got your training fuel for the finish. As a 4-time marathoner myself, I know that training for a marathon is no small feat. If you've taken on this challenge, then you already know how important it is to have a training plan. But did you know that what you eat during training is equally as important? Many runners experience deficiencies in key nutrients that are important for performing at your best. I know because when I was a cross-country runner in college, I cut many foods out of my diet, including red meat, thinking this was a healthy choice. However, I became so deficient in iron that oxygen could not get to my muscles and I couldn't even run a mile without feeling exhausted. In addition to iron, some other nutrients of particular importance for runners include potassium, zinc, and calcium, which play a role in muscle function and repair. Carbohydrates for energy and protein for recovery are also important. Stay with me to find out the easiest ways to fuel with these important nutrients. Now that I know how important iron is in my runner's diet, I eat plenty of good sources of iron, like fortified cereals and meats, especially lean beef. A 3-ounce serving of lean beef contains 14% of the daily value for iron. You'd have to eat almost 3 cups of raw spinach to get that same amount. To prevent cramps and keep an electrolyte balance, I focus on eating plenty of potassium-rich fruits and vegetables, such as bananas, oranges, and potatoes, and spinach, as well as low-fat dairy products. As an added bonus, low-fat dairy products include calcium, which is also important for muscle function. Other sources of calcium are leafy greens and some fish, such as salmon. Zinc is especially important for runners because it helps to strengthen the immune system, which heavy training can wear down. Also, zinc helps to repair muscle. Zinc is found in several types of food, including beans, nuts, and certain types of seafood, as well as dairy products. However, lean beef is an excellent source of zinc. In fact, you'd have to eat over 2,000 calories worth of salmon to get the same zinc in just a 150 calorie portion of beef. Now let's talk about gaining more energy and strength so you can train your best. During training, getting plenty of carbohydrates in your diet is especially important, as carbohydrates are your body's first source of energy. For the best benefits, stick to complex carbs such as whole grain breads, pastas, cereals, as well as starchy vegetables like potatoes and corn. Aim for several servings of these foods each day, being sure to eat some both before and after your training runs. Protein is also very important during training as it helps to build and repair your muscles after those intense training runs. Exercise is more effective when coupled with a protein-rich diet because it helps to maintain muscle mass while losing fat. In fact, 40% of the protein in your body is found in your muscles, so you can see how important protein is for muscle function. Choose lean sources of protein such as lean beef, fish, beans, and low-fat dairy products, and aim to eat about 1.7 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day. Lean beef in particular is a great choice post-workout as 3 ounces of lean beef gives you nearly half of your daily value for protein for only about 150 calories on average. This is great because research shows that individuals who ate protein within 1 hour of exercise achieved more lean body mass than those who just ate protein in the morning and the evening. But protein is not just important during post-exercise. In fact, studies show that high-quality protein consumed consistently throughout the day is a more efficient way of stimulating muscle production and repair than consuming only one larger protein meal each day. This can increase the ability of the athlete's bodies to better rebuild and repair muscle. Now that you know the nutrients you need to fuel your finish, grab some of our tasty training recipes in the show notes. We've got breakfast burritos, my personal favorite, a Mediterranean sandwich, and so much more. So eat right, train hard, the big day is almost here. And stay tuned for our next video so you'll know what to eat and what to avoid before the marathon.
New York City road runners, they have several races I've done. One of them is the Shape, Women's Shape. I've done that just about every year, and that's a historical race. I think women got into racing. I would say you saw more women in the 70s, so that's historical. It's an all-women's race, and it's sponsored by Shape magazine, so I've done that. I've done the infamous Brooklyn Half, which we all know about. And Brooklyn Half, I believe, is the second most popular race in the United States, second to the New York City Marathon, yes. I've done the Bronx 10 miler, and that's in September. And what's nice about that is I'm from the Bronx, so it's always nice to support your borough. And that race starts at the Grand Concourse all the way almost to my house, back to 161st Street. So that was a fun run too. It was very challenging because it was in the summertime, it was hot. And believe it or not, the Bronx does have hills. So you learn all that as well. You know, sometimes you're not really cognizant of the neighborhood you're living in until you actually have to walk or run the environment. And you find out a little bit more about that. Let me see. There was a couple along the way I can't really think of off the top of my head. I think I did the New York Mini. That was about 7 to 10 miles. And then in addition to just signing up for races, I belong to Black Girls Run and Start Line Runners. One of the races we've done, it's not a race, it's just running, period, just a train. We ran in Van Cortlandt. I've done the Greenway. And that right there, we would meet with a big group and we would run from 161st Street all the way to the Greenway. Once we get on the Greenway, we would take that all the way down to Battery Park City and come back. So that would be an example of one of our long runs. So in addition to signing up for races, I've done quite some interesting runs with just my group in total.
Okay.
You know.
We've been married about 15 months. And we happened to meet on the internet, by the way.
You know, at first, I was like, I don't know, maybe he's from Chicago, he might be a slick. And we got to talking, and I realized he was a man of integrity. This is the best age ever. Because you've been through some experiences and you know some things that you didn't understand earlier in life.
You can appreciate it, I think, now that you can look back on certain things.
You know, true passion is grown out of understanding and knowing someone.
The power of our love is integrity and honesty.
We just tell each other the truth, even when we don't
Agree.
Yeah, exactly. We agree to disagree.
Yeah, Rich, that's right. I love for you is
What?
genuine and real.
My love for you is complete.
I'm Kusha Karvandi with Exerscribe, and today I'm going to show you the best leg exercises to do 3 weeks before your marathon. The first exercise I really like is a squat with a transverse reach. And so this is good because it gets you doing more rotation while you're standing on 2 feet, and that's going to help you before your marathon training because if you think about running, a lot of it requires rotation throughout the entire kinetic chain. So we want to train you functionally for this because if we just train in one plane of motion with a standard squat or standard lunges, you're not going to be prepared for that race. So instead, you're going to do your squat. When you come up, you're going to go take a transverse step, so a rotational step. While keeping that front leg planted, you're going to reach and then come back, squat, go the other direction, reach, come back, squat. And every time you go into that transverse lunge, you should keep that front foot planted and you should feel a good stretch and mobilization of that front ankle. Next, you're going to use a TheraBand around the ankles and you're going to just do a side step. So you're going to go back and forth, here, here. You're going to do this for 60 seconds. And this exercise is really good because the glute medius is a muscle group that allows a lot of support for the pelvis, which you really need when you're doing a long endurance marathon. So the problem is with a lot of the forwards, the sagittal plane running, we don't get much glute activation in the medial head. Whereas this exercise puts direct pressure or direct resistance and activation on those medial glutes. The last exercise is a single leg balance reach, and this is really good because it helps mobilize and manipulate the joints like the ankles and the hips. And so that's important because when you're doing all this endurance training and even your strength training, you're putting a lot of stress on the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so this helps you kind of manipulate the joints and the nerves that are attached to them to help you essentially recover better. So that way you have really good proper mechanics and movement efficiency. So this exercise, you're going to balance on one leg, the other leg will be hovering, and what you're going to do is you're going to drive that foot forward, the foot that's hovering, in 3 planes. You're going to go forward, to the side, and transverse, and come back to the center. You're going to do that just 5 or 10 times in each direction, but the key is really bending the stable leg, bending that knee to drive the other foot forward. So you're not simply just reaching, you have to really drive that foot forward by mobilizing the ankle. Again, I'm Kusha Karvandi with Exerscribe, and today I just showed you the best leg exercises to do 3 weeks before your marathon.
So what I did was I had already qualified for the New York City Marathon a year prior to, because I did a thing called the 9+1 program. So that was already my next thing. That was already planned in advance. So my goal was, after Chicago, my goal was to fall back for a couple of weeks, throw them running shoes in the closet and don't think about nothing else, and give myself time to relax and rejuvenate and refresh and begin again.
I had to sit down. I am, my feet, my body, I am like, I'm done.
But because I had already qualified for the New York City Marathon, I knew it was coming the following year. I had to kind of gauge myself and get myself back into the fold. But I did it very slowly though. All of us, a good majority of us work full-time jobs. We have other responsibilities and other things going on in our lives. So this is a huge commitment. So what happened was I had gotten to a point where I was just tired. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I physically took 2 weeks off. I didn't want to hear about running. I didn't want to hear about Garmin and Nike and running shoes and Cadence and, did I PR? I didn't give a damn about none of that. I wanted it to be over. So what I did was I said to myself, no, you're not dropping out. What we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves a couple of days. We're going to pull back, and then let's look at our schedule again and just get back in. We're just going to just keep going. Just keep staying plugged in. Keep staying plugged in. And actually, when you plug in, you find out that your situation is not unique, because everybody that you're training with goes through the exact same thing. So that's why you stay plugged in. and you work through it, because commitment is not always about how you feel about something. So I had to reassess, rejuvenate, and I came back and I said, okay, listen, you're almost there. A couple of days before the marathon, I went to, it was time for me to go pick up my bib. So I arranged, you have to pick up your bib and your package at Jacob Javits Center.
Have your bag open down.
I think these 2 pocket guys will be.
They can take care of it.
Okay. T-shirt? Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, where you going now? Medium, right? Oh, the shirt's already in here? Yes, the shirt. Thank you. All right. Okay, that's it. Done.
So prior to that, 2 weeks prior to that, I was already positioning myself, meaning I was already laying out the clothes I was going to wear. I was already starting to slowly but surely pack my bag, make sure I had things in line. I would say a week prior to. I remember I couldn't sleep. I was very anxious. I was happy that my training was completely finished. So I completely finished the training. But it was a lot of high anxiety. So when it was time for me to pick up my bib, all I wanted to do was pick the bib up and get in and get out. But I did start feeling quietly excited because you're running into different people at the convention center, you're getting excited. But I said, let me just contain myself. My goal is to pick up my bib, take a picture here or there, and get myself home. So that's how it pretty much, I just try to keep it as simple as possible, but I had a very difficult time sleeping. I was very anxious and I couldn't eat.
Well, you always want to sleep well the night before the race, but you really can't guarantee it. So what I recommend is that the days leading up, so the week of the marathon, to get your sleep then. That way, if you do miss some sleep the night before the race on St. Patrick's Day on the 17th, you're well rested going into that day. So it's not critical you get your 8 to 10 hours of sleep the night before the marathon, but it always helps.
I had already arranged to take some time off from work. That was arranged months ago. So my last day of work, everybody, wished me well. They said, I'm going to be tracking you. I said, fine. I got home. I said, the next thing I have to do is, start gathering my stuff. I got to take my dog. I got to drop him off. You still have life things to take care of prior to the race. I had to make sure that I had everything in place so that I can leave and go get to the hotel, because I wouldn't be able to return home until the marathon was completely over. So I did all the things that I had to do. I made sure I had all my documents, make sure I had all my bib. We were actually staying at a hotel in the city. So I prepared myself. We checked into the hotel. I got all my clothes lined up because I would have to get up early in the morning. I had to be up around 4:30 to get myself downstairs, to get on the bus so the bus can take me to the Verrazano Bridge. The way they have it arranged is you can either get yourself to the Verrazano Bridge, or you can use a bus system. They have a specific bus for the marathon runners, and they meet at 42nd Street near the library. So I chose that option. So they had tents. They encourage, you saw people bring baskets with them and food and so forth, because you don't start running right away. You run, there's a certain period of time that you run. Your bib tells you what time you run and what zone you need to be in. Obviously the runs are staggered. So you have some people that run at 8, some people run at 9, 10, 11, and 12. Disabled, they probably run first, and then it goes in some kind of order. It also goes in order of how fast you are as well. Obviously the fastest runners go first. So the way the village was set up was it was set up in different zones, so you knew exactly where to sit. They had food there. Dunkin' Donuts was there. They had big jumbo tribes where you can actually see the marathon while you were sitting on the grass. So it was very common to see people sitting under tents. They were sitting under the grass. They were taking naps. They were getting Gatorade. It was set up very nicely and very comfortably. The other thing that they do is, because it's so cold in the morning time, usually people come and they layer up. And they encourage you to wear old clothing so you can donate that. So that's a very common thing. They had bins set up so that you can donate your clothes prior to you running. Also, the other thing you can do is, it's very common when you're running to see clothes along the way, along the marathon route. You can physically strip your clothes off. They tell you to wear old clothes, and there's organizations that come and collect that. So it was well established, well set up. I just took my time. I got there early. I sat somewhere. I spoke to a couple of people. I took a nap. I drank some coffee. I had some tea. It was well done, well organized, and I was very comfortable. With the Jumbo Tribe, we were able to see the runner. We were able to see everything happening in live form, because we saw, you're watching that, and at the same time you're getting yourself excited because you're getting ready to run. They played New York, New York by Frank Sinatra. All the New York songs. So it was really like, oh my God, my time is about to come. And then what they do is they make announcements, and they say, okay, group, the orange group, the 11 o'clock group, please come to so-and-so. It's now time. So when it was my time, I was getting ready. I started stripping down, donating some clothes in the bins. And then what they do is they say something in the morning time. They, thank you for coming out. It's just, I can't even explain. They started playing the Frank Sinatra music. They shoot the gun, and that was it. And we took off from there. And there's two things that I noticed. I was getting ready to take off. There was one person in front of me that was barefoot, and there was another one that had flip-flops on, and she had a sari on, and she did that entire marathon, I was told. She was in my group. Actually, she finished before I did. So
Thanks for watching today's episode. And as you know, we've been filming Dorina Smith's marathon runs. And as she stated, she's not a marathon runner. She's just a working mom who has adapted a healthy lifestyle through running and diet. So we invite you to tune in on our next episode, as we will have Doreen take us through the day of the New York City Marathon 2018. Thanks for watching.